Hey, folks. Welcome to the AI Files, our lovely channel of all things AI, where we talk about all the news, announcements, launches, etc., as well as we cover aspects like, what's happening in, let's say, even in the Azure and Microsoft world, but particularly with a deep focus on what's happening in the corporate lives of all the citizens who want to actually use the AI. I'm your co-host, Shadab Hussain, and I'm actually director of Microsoft in the Data and AI division, and based out of New Jersey. Over to you, Jimmy.
Hey, and good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, everybody. I'm Jamie Basilico. I'm the co-host of AI Files. Like Shadab, I work for Microsoft. I've been in the industry for just about 35 years covering data and AI. I'm so glad to be with you again this morning or this afternoon, again, or whatever time zone that you may be in. As usual, just wanted to state that the opinions by myself and Shadab are our own, and the opinions that we do express here are not of Microsoft. So with that being said, let's get into our session for today and talk about a lot of topics. So there are a few things in the news. Certainly, I don't think we can go any week that doesn't have some news related to AI. I'll take the first one, Shadab, and then maybe just kick off on some other ones. But the Google CEO, Sundar Pichai, actually announced on Thursday, which was yesterday, depending on when you're listening to this, that Pradap, I'm going to mess up his name, but Pradakar Raghavan, who is the executive in charge of the company's search engine and ads product, is actually leaving his role. He was a longtime Google executive. So longtime Google executive Nick Fox will replace Raghavan, who will now take the role of chief technologist. And I think this just comes, in the grand scheme of things, we do see a lot of executives moving, not only, within the major companies, but also some of the smaller companies. And I think this is to be expected. Some of it is maybe internally motivated, but I think there's number one, either burnout of people. People have been in roles and now they're taking on either expanded or new opportunities at other organizations. So Google is no different than any other org. So again, just quick hit there. Just be aware of changes in the way that some of these companies are actually structured and who's driving some of the main technologies.
Hey, you did a pretty good job, Jimmy, with the name, actually. I will give you 99.5%. Prabhakar Raghavan, yes. Pretty good job. So, yeah, actually, the people changes continue to happen, and generally these changes indicate that okay, the change in approach is probably on the cards, right? Many times. So we'll see what will happen. Well, in the other news, Jimmy, Mark Benioff and Microsoft. There is a ongoing tussle. It's a historic tussle. Of course, they are arch rivals in the app space, the CRM. So he continues to say that okay, AI is. I'm like this is the most important thing I've worked in my career. AI is everything. But he also said that it has become overhyped and probably oversold, and no surprise, he blames Microsoft for that one. So, of course, there's a competition between the Salesforce and the Microsoft. So, that kind of, I would say, some drama continues to happen between the players. Actually, it's a fascinating space. It's like you can write the entire Game of Thrones, Jamie, on the AI.
Yeah, that's so true.
Exactly, but I think more important and more interesting, I would say, the news item was that there is a in Massachusetts, in one of the school district, actually, um, students' parents have sued the school district faculty members for punishing their son who actually used the AI to write a history class essay. Now, they claim that he only used it as a tool and he's not like plagiarizing or something. He's just creating an outline of the essay, and then he's going to cite the sources, etc. And there's nothing wrong in creating an outline as per them. The school actually took a pretty harsh turn on this one, and they gave him like some zero grades. This guy student looks like pretty good actually in the studies. He has secured perfect marks on the ACT, and he's been like eyeing admission to Stanford. So this definitely hurts, right? Because his grade is now down to, I think, C's and D's, something like that. His overall GP has gone down because of that. And and they even barred him from some admission into National Honor Society and all those kind of thing. So that really hurt him, and the parents are mad, and of course they have sued the school district, and the school is claiming that this is as against the AI policy, but they didn't have an AI policy. So now they're like retroactively they're trying to create an AI policy which kind of bar people to use it. Now that throws like, I mean, I feel that this seems like harsh. If particularly if it was the first time, this seems like pretty harsh. That's one. Secondly, that unless you have a policy, how can you punish someone without a policy? That's another thing, but it's a debatable. And the third thing is that it really opens up the question that, okay, can you not use AI? Don't we use the Google search? Do we like conventionally go to the library and borrow like 10 books and do all the research? Who does that? I mean, anyway, we use the search actually. So how is it different? That's a question that it opens up.
Yeah, I think we could almost spend a whole episode just on this one topic alone because, first thing is, like you mentioned, the education system itself, like they have to come up with policies. And I have seen some initial, I'll call it standardization of policies on use of generative AI, not only for students, but also for teachers and how teachers can use AI to aid in their, teaching and their abilities to bring to the classroom. And truth be told, there's companies in the education space that are using generative AI to help teachers in the classroom deliver the content. So it's like, why encourage teachers and to be honest, like folks like us that are in IT or business, where we're being asked to use Gen AI or artificial intelligence to aid in our work. So why punish students in themselves for a thing that they're more likely going to have to use when they get into the real world and go into, a job, 9 to 5 or whatever hours that they're going to work. So to me, this is an area that is ripe for change. It's an area that needs to be, I don't know if I want to call it regulated, but at least something that has to draw up policies, because I guarantee you this will not be the last as it relates to, something like this where, a student gets reprimanded, suspended or whatever for using Gen AI. And I certainly think it's not right. But there needs to be some happy medium that things are defined so people know what the rules are.
Absolutely. And having come from a culture where we used to do calculations on our fingers, I feel that calculator is also same. Calculator has dumbed down the current set of students, right? They can't do any calculation on the fly. So, we have come from that generation where we did used to calculate pretty easily, right? But I don't see any difference. It's just a tool, and I think the question is that, okay, if you're using a tool, everybody knows that you're using calculator. Similarly, yeah, I mean, I think just make it standard, and that yes, you have used the AI, but here is how you have used it. So I think one thing I can tell you that it's not that easy to implement, and that's why I think the schools are just or any society or even organizations are just trying to simply taking an easier approach, just ban everything, rather than
Yeah.
clearly defining what is a permitted use, what is a prohibited use of it.
Right.
So
It's the easy route out. Like we don't understand
exactly.
it. Let's just ban everything.
Yep,
But
absolutely.
so
Um,
totally switching topics onto some launches. So Mistral is or has released two new state of the art models, and these are really slated towards on device computing as well as the edge compute for generative AI. And they're called the Mistral 3B and Mistral 8B. So both of these models support 128,000 token context length and and the Mistral 8B has an interleave sliding window to help for pattern and memory efficiencies in the inferencing. So again, these are the whole reason why these came about. And I think, you take a step back and you look at how the market is changing or shifting. We all have these, by the way. I've got the Apple Intelligence in the beta, but we're the reason why I mentioned that is people are demanding to have, on device artificial intelligence, Gen AI. For what reason? For privacy, as it relates to the things that they're doing, as it relates to inference, local, I don't want to say bypassing local rules, but being able to have something that doesn't have to go out to the internet. So being able to do on-device translation, being internet less, like not being connected to the AI, sorry, not being connected to the internet, to provide some AI to do smart assistants without doing that, and or doing just things like local analytics on the devices, whatever it may be. So the whole idea that what Mistral is doing was to build these that are compute efficient, to be low latency solutions that address these different scenarios on these different devices. And what's interesting when you take, again, a broader look, Mistral 7B, which was very successful, that was only introduced a year ago. And now the smallest model, the 3B, actually outperforms the 7B model in almost all of the benchmarks that are out there. So this speaks to the way that these new models are, number one, being created. As I mentioned already, some of this, the more efficient ways of doing the inferencing through memory efficient determination, as well as then, just how these models are actually being trained and using its data. So very interesting. I think this is, not only Mistral is doing this, but we see it across the board. Microsoft, great example with our Phi 3.5 models as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the phone is not the only thing. Phone and watch are even like not the only thing. Remember the glasses. The glasses also, can use these edge models. Even the ring. The Samsung has a ring actually, right? So as well. So, a lot is happening on the devices, and I think these smaller models have a great future, I would say. By the way, I thought that you would actually use their French name of the model, which is actually Les Ministral.
yeah,
So that is what they call it actually. In English, it is translated as Ministral.
yeah.
Okay,
Every
great.
time every time I hear that, I think of that Lynn Mesereau, the the play and movie. So
Yes.
I get different visions in my head when I hear that.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I think, on that theme of the launches, any other model launch, Jamie, this week?
Yeah, Nvidia just dropped a 70 billion parameter model. What's interesting on this, at least that's being touted in their metrics, is that it actually beats GPT-4o and Anthropic Sonnet 3.5 in various different benchmark tests. So the notion here is that it's a combination with Llama model, by the way. So it's a Llama 3.1 Nematron 70B instruct, but it's all about refining the open source model from Llama using advanced training techniques, specifically the RLHF, which is the reinforced learning from human feedback. So it's just again a way that it's actually using this training technique to improve the efficiency of it. So what's interesting again is that it's a 70B model, which is less than what is there for the GPT-4o model as well as the Sonnet model. So again, this is where companies are coming up with refined training techniques to eke out more from these models, and it's almost like leapfrog, which is great. I'm sure something else will come out in the next week or two from some of the other players, but ultimately we are the benefactors of this because these models are just getting better at what they're able to do in terms of like the language understanding, obviously other characteristics as well. So anyway, that was a new model drop by Nvidia, coupled with the open source Llama 3.1 model.
Yeah, and NVIDIA already has a family of models, NVLM family of models. These are multimodal models, including the 72 billion parameter. Now, this clearly indicates where Nvidia is going, right? So I think importantly, they're not going to just restrict themselves to the hardware. They are definitely getting into the the actual model space as well. They want to be the full AI company. So um, it will be a tricky one though, because they of course are supplier to all these companies who are training the models. So they're not doing much fanfare around it, but they're definitely building that capability.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of like they're just dropping it. It's like, oh, here's a new model, which is great.
Yeah,
You know, it just means it's commonplace now.
yeah, exactly. Now, one thing is that, Jamie, I have one assignment for you. Every model that comes out on the launch, they all claim that they're better than others. How do we reconcile this? I still don't know. Because every model claims, yeah, I'm better than GPT, I'm better than Claude. And but there must be some truth, right? How do we reconcile all these better claims? So somebody has to find out what exactly is going on.
True. I mean, there's so in these tests, I mean, there's obviously things like the MMLU, but there's also tests by areas where people actually see models and they could see the results, and then they could do some compare. On this one specifically, there's and again, this is on a GitHub repro, and we'll put it out in the show notes. But Arena Hard Auto, that's what was used to compare these, and it's an automated evaluation tool for InstructTunes LLMs. So there's in this case for this one, there's 500 different queries or user queries that it's pulled from the chatbot arena. And again, if you don't know what chatbot arena is, that's the one that could do side by side comparisons and you score different models without knowing. It's sort of like this is going to be a throwback to like the 80s, but the blind soda test or the Pepsi challenge where you don't know what soda it is. Same idea with these LLMs. You don't know what LLM is actually being used. You're just looking at results and you say, I like this one better. That's a score. So that chatbot arena with the different queries and questions, it's put into this Arena Auto Hard, which is just an automated evaluation tool based upon what's in the chatbot arena. So, is it an MMLU? No, it's more or less like, hey, I like this better than not. Um, in some cases, I actually think that's maybe even a better test because you're actually getting real world results back from people that are using these tools and models. So anyway, this might be another one where we spend maybe a future show going into what is the chatbot arena and or like some of these automated tools that are based off of that and kind of go through it in a little bit more depth or detail. Sorry, that was probably a little bit longer than what you were intending, but those are ways that people can actually see and evaluate and understand at least what's going into some of these scoring things, especially those that are human-based feedback. Which, by the way, if you are using ChatGPT, you may have seen sometimes in a response you actually get two side-by-side responses. That's actually reinforced human learning because they're gaining knowledge from you as you say, I like the left or the right better. And that's literally what they do when you bring up some of these responses. So anyway, back to you. Way
No,
off.
good. I think that's good to learn because sometimes you have to sift through all these claims, right, and make sense of them. So I think that's helpful. By the way, talking about some of the benchmark, Meta is not far behind. They also like to be in the news, so they actually released two new media generation benchmarks. So like now that this whole text to video and text and audio to video generation is also taking place, so we need more benchmarks, right? Specifically testing those because they are now becoming more and more mainstream. We have lots of benchmark for generally the LLMs, but for the LLMs with the video multimodal capabilities, those benchmarks are not sufficient. So Meta is trying to take a step, and they're saying that okay, hey, we are actually creating these new generation benchmarks. One of them is movie gen video benchmark, and another is the movie gen audio benchmark, and they essentially help you benchmark the model's capability to generate the video and like text to video, and the other is text and audio, text plus video to the audio. And they claim that they have used these different prompts so that like you can assess how well, let's say, the picture of an nature has been created, the audio has been created associated with video and things like that. So they're trying to create the new benchmarks on that regard. And the other thing that they also launched is something they call Core Tracker 3. This is the third version of the Core Tracker. Core Tracker is actually a kind of a, they essentially helps you track the objects in the videos, right? Through the motion. So somebody's walking, how do you actually track that entire thing in terms of that, okay, that you can track that entire object point to point. Okay. It's easy to just do it adjust at a point, but here you can actually do all the points on that object particularly, which is a harder problem to solve. So that's what actually they have been working on. This one is actually better in many regards because you can actually, like for example, through some object, right, or occlusion they call it, somebody is passing through and you can't see the object anymore, but the code tracker is still tracking the object pretty well. Generally what happens is that, if an object is passing through through something else and you lose the sight of that object, the tracking goes messed up. Tracking goes, like it just can't track anymore. But the Core Tracker 3 actually does a much better job in tracking the object while it is passing through some occlusion as well. So some new capabilities that they have actually released as part of this, of course, it's going to help them in their own video generation and other capabilities as well.
Great. No, that sounds good. Yeah, I think you were going to see a lot more of these different benchmarks for more than just what I'm going to say text. So as we get into this new media or capabilities for providing media as output. Speaking of media, one thing that I just want to highlight, I know that we talked about the GPT-4o real-time preview, which allows for, like spoken word in and spoken word out. But one of the things that might have been missed by folks is the ability for the new GPT-4o real-time model to accept audio as input, more than just the spoken word in real time. You could actually send, MP3 files, much in the same way that you can, attach an image and have the model reason over it. It's only available through the API, at least for now. But this obviously opens up, additional capabilities. When we talk about multimodal, these models are starting to really be multimodal rather than just, text alone. So this is a great new capability and feature. And like I said, it's only API driven for now. I would fully expect that, your typical tools, whether or not you're using ChatGPT or, a Microsoft Copilot, to surface those capabilities. Speaking of ChatGPT, I don't know how many had seen this already, but going back maybe about 4 or 5 months ago, OpenAI, it was actually in the springtime when they did their spring event, announcing some of the new capabilities. They showed the ability for ChatGPT on the desktop to be able to interact with the desktop app and see the environment, at least what was being shown. So that application got released to Mac, at least a portion thereof. So Windows users were pretty much left in the dust, at least up until earlier this week. So OpenAI finally put out the ChatGPT app for Windows. Couple caveats: it's only available for those that have ChatGPT Plus or in the enterprise or team or education users. So you could start testing that today. And again, it's an early version of it. So let me just show it actually instead of just talking about it. So I am a paid user. I think I've mentioned that a few times already. Let me just share out my desktop here.
Yeah, and while you do that, just a quick addition on the GPT-4o audio. The audio, roughly the 1 hour of audio input is equal to 128K tokens, which is the max context window. So you can actually insert up to 1 hour of audio input. And remember, it is different from real-time API because it is async. So real-time API is low latency, speech to speech. This one you can do actually kind of as an offline, or you can just attach an audio model. So it's slightly different. Don't confuse that with a real-time API.
Yep. An hour, that's a lot.
Yeah.
If you think about it, like call center applications where you're not doing it in real time, but you have an audio, you could just take that audio and do it in batch, or like one at a time through the API. So that's like a use case for it. Anyway, back to the ChatGPT app. Two impressions, at least that I have just by looking at it. It's okay. I'm not like over enthusiastic about it, to be honest with you. So if you've been using ChatGPT through the web, which I've been doing, it's pretty much the same experience. There's obvious things missing or not in here yet. Again, it's a preview, so fully expect, not fully baked. I referenced the spring event that OpenAI did, and if you had seen that video, they actually had the capability of taking basically a snapshot or a picture of whatever was on your desktop at the time and interacted with it. Probably a better way of saying it. It was like, instead of taking a picture of your screen and then putting it into the ChatGPT interface, it would just do it automatically. It had that viewing or vision into what you're seeing, not necessarily the things around you, but actually what's on your desktop. That's not in here with the Windows desktop. So hopefully it'll come eventually, right? So basically, once you log in, because you do have to log in, because as I said before, you need to be a paid user. It brings up all your GPTs that you might have created, your history of whatever you looked at. And I have one up here. I just did something simple against one of the GPTs that I did just to show. And here's why I wanted to show this. There is one cool feature. This is so simple as a feature, but I like it. I'm just going to minimize this, right? So there's a capability, if you do Alt space at the same time, it's going to bring up what I call a mini window, and it keeps your context of whatever you had displayed in ChatGPT. Plus, it also brings back your window wherever you left it. So watch real quick. I just did the Alt space, and it brings up the mini window. So again, like I said, it's not like earth shattering, but this is just the last conversation I had. So I don't have all the other pieces, but I could open this back up in the full main window. So wherever you are, wherever you're working, and if you just do Alt space, it'll bring it right up and you could start working. So you talk about productivity and the things that you might be doing in a real-time sensor scenario. When I want an answer to come back from my Gen AI, OpenAI toolset, I have that at my fingertip. But that's about the extent of what I would say is the earth-shattering things. And again, that's not too earth-shattering, but it's a start. So thumbs up to that. Glad to see that it's in here. By the way, to get this, if you're a Windows user and you're watching this or listening to this now and you're a paid user, it's in the Windows Store. So you just go to the Windows Store and just search for OpenAI, or search for ChatGPT, and then you just install it. Again, once you install it, the only thing you have to do is connect into your GPT account, and that's it.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad it is actually there. It just makes it easier to actually use on the Windows. All right, so I think on that line, Perplexity is also not behind. They also want to get into the enterprise, Jamie. So they actually made a launch called Internal Knowledge Search just yesterday, and essentially their positioning is that, hey, you don't just do search outside the work. You can actually now do the search inside the work as well. So you can combine the web and your workspace to search. So internal knowledge search, essentially, it is a feature that allows user to search both the public web content and the internal knowledge bases. And it's available for Perplexity Pro and Enterprise Pro users. And you can use that, for example, if you are in the financial services team, you are doing some research, you can use the internal documents as well as the external web. Now, nothing new if you are a Copilot user, right? So if you are a Copilot user, you already actually has this, because you can actually combine web and work securely within your context, within your security framework, etc., whatever you use. So you can already use that. Perplexity is now offering this as a service. Nothing new, but they are now trying to match up with the Copilot. Okay. By the way, they did actually another thing as well, which is called Perplexity Spaces. It's like a collaboration hub. So you can essentially collaborate between the teams, and like you can share the search results, you can manage the access. So essentially they are also positioning it as a research kind of tools, but combining both the web and the workspace. Okay.
That's good.
So yeah, that's on the launcher side. But what about the Azure and Microsoft? I mean, of course, there is always something that Azure will be happening every week from the Azure and Microsoft world as well. And we have, for example, the Azure Cobalt, which is actually Microsoft's own internally developed CPU, that was announced actually, I think, last year. It is the first 64-bit ARM-based Azure Cobalt 100 CPU, which is fully designed in-house. And it actually offers 50% better price performance than the previous generation ARM-based VMs. Now, what Azure Databricks has done is they actually has now put the Azure Databricks also on these new chips, and they endorse that it actually has a 40% better performance than the previous generation of ARM-based VM. So that's a really good news. If you are a Azure Databricks user within the Azure, now you can actually use this Cobalt 100 VMs cluster for your ETL, batch processing, and whatnot, and it actually will give you 40% better price performance, essentially.
Yeah, and the thing with that, Databricks is certainly one workload. There's been some testing as well for other quote unquote compute intensive resource usage on just the overall performance of the CPUs. So when you think about, and here's where I put on my architect hat and say, like, if you're building a AI based application or Gen AI, it's not just about the large language model. You obviously need an application around that. So, are you building, let's say, a Java-based set of workloads, or do you have web servers that are, utilizing, whatever operating system? So, if you're not spinning up, an Azure web service itself for websites, well, you might be standing up your own VMs. Well, the performance that we've seen is 1.5 or 150% increase for Java-based workloads, or a 200% increase for web servers that are running .NET applications and in-memory cache-based applications compared to the previous Azure ARM-based VMs. So definitely an increase in capability. The other thing that these VMs support, and again, it's a re-architected architecture on the chipset, but with that becomes a increased capability for local storage and the IOPS that come along with that. So a 4x increase there, which also increases the network bandwidth by 150%, again, compared to the previous ARM generation base. So this just helps out everywhere in the sense of whatever you're doing, whether or not it's core business logic that's running within Java, or just web front ends that you might be creating within the VM.
Mm. Okay. And again, from the Microsoft house, essentially, they also now have the first the title of first cloud running NVIDIA's Blackwell system, featuring GB200 powered servers, and they also take advantage of InfiniBand. So just a small milestone and getting the latest chips in the Azure cloud now. Okay. The other thing is, Jamie, I wanted to actually now talk about the AI quote of the week, and there is something interesting there as well. Yann LeCun, the somebody who actually has the AI at Meta, and he's also a professor at NYU. He said, "quote It seems to me that before urgently figuring out how to control AI systems much smarter than us, we need to have the beginning of a hint of a design for a system smarter than a house cat." Unquote. A, Yann LeCun is actually, of course, he doesn't need any introduction. He's also Turing Award winner. He's considered in the category like Jeff Hinton, etc. Unofficial kind of godfather of AI. He's done a lot of work. He is of a paradigm where that he says that, look, AI is not an existential threat. Unlike, Jeff Hinton, for example. Jeff Hinton warns about there is an existential threat from the AI. But Yann LeCun is actually more optimist. He believes that the current LLM, no matter how much you throw at them, right, in terms of the compute and training and all those, that's not going to become simply the AGI. That's not the direction. The AGI is a different. To really be having that kind of super intelligence or AGI, etc., you have to have the models which learns from the visual information, just like the babies do, right? The toddlers do, etc. They look at things, or they look at the real world thing and they learn from it, not just like this training data. So his direction is different in that term. He's not scared of the current LLMs becoming a threat in that say, right, existential threat, to put it. And he said that these models are no more smarter than a house cat, which I'm happy about because I have three cats. So that means I have actually three more than powerful actually than the AI system actually in the house. So that's good to know. Um, uh, but it's also like essentially, and he also said that, right? I mean, if you ask him that, okay, is it like the AI? He said that you are going to have to pardon my French, but that's complete BS. That's what he said. So he doesn't believe that we have that kind of thread, and he's skeptical of claim that AI will soon surpass human intelligence. The current approach is not going to do that. You have to have a different approach to get there. Actually, that's what his perspective.
That's interesting. Yeah. I go back and equate it to, how times and things are changing, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, and it's good to know that there are different perspectives, and we'll see how that things happen. Um, by the way, this week, a company who is using AI and building the business, we generally cover an AI startup or AI company, and for this week we have ScaleAI. So remember, AI is an ecosystem. You need all kind of companies, the chip makers and the model trainers, and the people who are building the apps, and the people who are actually just using those like for learning, for example, or teaching AI. It's an entire ecosystem. New economy is being developed, and one of that area is the data. Data is actually essential, very very important for the AI. We sometimes don't talk too much about it because it is generally at behind the scene. But remember, the OpenAI is cutting the deals with the syndicates, sources, the news source channels, etc., to get the content, because content is important to train that. In fact, content is the whole premise of SLM is actually the quality of the content. But where does the quality of the content come from? You need properly labeled data. So and that's what the Scale AI does. So they actually started because they started their business to provide the label data for the autonomous driving vehicles, right? Because this autonomous driving vehicles need a lot of training, they need the label data, etc., to actually learn that, and that's what they started, uh, the providing. But now they're actually also providing the data to even OpenAI, Airbnb, Toyota, and all those clients. So they provide the label images, which means that they have their own system through which they actually create a label data. But they also employ a large workforce. People who essentially their job is just to look at something and then label them, whether it's image, text, audio, or any kind of data. That's what the business model of Scale AI is. They do sometimes occasionally come in the news. They were founded in 2016 by Alexander Wong and Lucy Guo. And sometimes they get into some controversies as well. Wherever you touch the data, there will always be controversy anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting as you. Sorry, excuse me. It's interesting as you mentioned. I mean, they started out in one space, but looking at being a data company that can help arrange data that's needed for training for AI. And most people overlook that simple fact that, without data, we wouldn't have large language models. That's what's used to train on. And even if you're building like I'll call it a core machine learning model to do prediction, you need data. You need good data. So, Scale
Cool.
AI is a company, that specializes in data annotation and, services that are going to help machine learning. I think that's super important. So, great find. And I'm interested in learning more about them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and one more thing, we also talk about many times that how AI is being put to use, essentially, right? How the different companies and organizations are actually making use of the AI. So, on that regard, this week we will talk about how our own Fed, the Feds actually are using the AI. So, AI is actually helping the Fed's agencies, right? The Treasury and the IRS and all those agencies. They are actually helping them catch $1 billion of fraud in just 1 year. Okay, so what they're doing is, and they're not even using the Gen AI. This is like your conventional AI. They're essentially now starting to use the AI, which many banks and others already do, but they are catching up. They're now using them because remember the Treasury Department, for example, right? They actually they actually make payments 1.4 billion payments valued at about $7 trillion to 100 million people, right? It can range from social security, the Medicaid, and all those kind of things, tax refunds, stimulus check. There's a lot, right? So you can imagine there is always going to be some vultures who will try to take advantage of the system, and there are fraudsters around there. So right, so they have started actually using the AI to identify those fraud check payment. Their approach is very clear. They use AI to identify them, detect them. However, there is always a human in the loop to make the final determination. And they have already said that they've actually used, they have saved more than $1 billion of fraud in just 1 year, and they're just getting started. They're going to use it more and more now, and the next is essentially, they want to go into like like for example, identify the unemployment insurance fraud and things like that. So it's a good news that even feds are actually trying to use AI a lot more for the benefit.
Yeah, that'll be good as long as people don't get erroneously audited or something like that. But no, I think that's really good as far as whether it's the Treasury or any other department, looking to use AI for good. And in this sense, it's trying to combat fraud, which is rampant, obviously, in not only in this country but many other countries as well. So that's great.
That's a huge problem. In fact, the online payment fraud is expected to surpass $362 billion by 2028. And
Wow.
all this was published in the CNN news sources. So you can find out there was research done from the Juniper Research and all that. In fact, in Hong Kong, police actually they found a finance worker was tricked by a deepfake video into paying $25 million to fraudster. Jimmy, what are we doing? This is specialized in deepfake.
Are you saying we should go into the fraud fraud business?
Exactly, that's amazing, right? I mean, but this is horrible. I mean, it's so difficult nowadays to identify, and people take advantage of all sort of things, including social engineering.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I've seen it personally. My in-laws got not 25 million, thankfully, but a few $100. Don't click on this kind of thing, but I could see where that will elevate into, like you said, deep fakes. Get your favorite personality, make it look really good, and or God forbid, someone's grandson or granddaughter being faked, which has happened already. So yeah, applicability obviously to the Treasury and things that they could do are super important. It helps protect people and protects our hard-earned dollars, whether or not it's at a local level or something that goes back into the government. So,
Absolutely. And I think with that, we are done with the episode today. So yeah, I think just a final appeal, folks. We love the feedback. Please drop your comments, feedback, any way you want to contact us. All contacts are given on the page. Drop any comments, like, share, subscribe, and we would love to actually continue to talk about all these things.
sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Have a good
Bye,
one,
bye.
everybody. See you,
Bye,
Shab.
Jimmy. Bye.